would like to introduce our panelists and let them tell you about their organizations briefly. So we have Amy Robertson from Consolidated Grain and Barge, CGB.
Yes. I work for Consolidated Grain and Barge. I actually work for the division Diversified Services. The company has 8 different divisions, and the Diversified Services division specializes in crop insurance and risk management. So the internships that we are looking for are for adjuster trainees that will work throughout. We have 28 different states that we work in, so we have a lot of different options for students and interns. And Joanne also works for Consolidated Grain and Barge on the grain side. So
I work for the grain division, and mainly we'll be looking to recruit grain merchandisers and grain TSM employees, grain operations employees in our facilities. We do a lot of inland freight and a lot of export grain.
A lot of logistics, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Tremendous amount of logistics and sales.
Drew?
Great. Drew Ratterman. I'm with Dowger Sciences. I've been with the company for 15 years in a variety of different roles. Our organization is headquartered in Indianapolis, Indiana, which was just a short 2-hour drive from here. There we essentially are a ag chem and seed company. We're the fastest growing ag chem and seed company in the world. We've got $6.8 billion in sales, about 7,000 employees, and we're wholly owned by the Dow Chemical Company, which is the 26th largest company in the world. So with an organization that size, we've got lots of different opportunities. We hire bachelor's, master's, PhDs, numerous intern and full-time positions.
And this is Patricia Simpson, for those of you who don't know.
I'm the Director of Career Services and Academic Advising for the School of Chemical Sciences, so I work with chemistry and chemical engineering students primarily.
So the format tonight is a little bit relaxed. We have some prepared questions that we thought we could start with. If you have resume questions that you would like to ask the panel, you are more than welcome to. If anybody would like to start off one, or if you'd like me to start one, I'm happy to do that. All right. Well, I will ask the first question to get this rolling. And I'll direct this to anybody on the panel who would like to add this. But I'll just start with this question. When should I start eliminating the honors I earned in high school? Anybody?
I think when you have sufficient honors in college to kind of equal or balance that out. But if you still have a high school honor that stands out and really makes you head and shoulders above other applicants, I'd include it. You know, I'd continue to include those type of things in it.
Some example might be Eagle Scouts, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's a distinction that you earn younger, but it's something that, you know, as an HR practitioner, you probably look for. Is that?
Yeah, I see Eagle Scout, American FFA degree,
Yes,
some of those distinctions on numerous resumes, even in graduate students or PhD students. I would agree that as your achievement, both professionally and academically, begin to outweigh those high school achievements, you need to make sure that they come off the resume. I certainly wouldn't keep a resume to 2 pages to accommodate high school achievements. And certainly a resume needs to be, oftentimes a freshman who's looking for an intern type of opportunity would have essentially what was their resume to get into college, and you need to have a professional resume as opposed to an academic resume in that regard.
Any other comments? Or okay, great.
One other
Yeah,
just thing that comes
sure.
to mind is I do think that a lot of, particularly in agriculture, a lot of recruiters are interested in an agricultural background. So you don't think about working as a farmhand as you grow up as a job, but I'd say that that is pertinent all the way through your career.
That's a good point. It's a very good point. Oh, there was a question.
Oh yeah, I had a question as far as like what to include. As far as like high school goes, you guys are mentioning that if you had experience, what if you were selected for a program or you participated in a program that was relevant to what you wanted to do or go into, or even apply to, I guess. Like for instance, since I'm a pre-med here, I basically participated in this 1 week or a week and a half over the summer where I, shadowed doctors for a whole week, and it was like a giant seminar thing. It was held in Chicago, and we got to watch a live knee surgery, like something like that. Or even like as far as on the other side with academics in school, what if you got like a special recognition for being academic all-state between balancing sports and grades? Would that be something to include, or I guess?
I would definitely include that, and like I said, keep that on there until you have something that outweighs or outbalances that. But especially if you include things that pertain to the profession that you are going into and searching for an internship for, I would definitely leave those achievements on there.
So, just going, oh, you have a question? Sorry?
Someone actually answered the link question.
That was what I was going to ask.
1 page for me.
Yeah, I would say that any undergraduate should be 1 page. I was going to go there next. A master's student, arguably, if it's material that is relevant to your professional search, then I've seen 2 pages. I would still prefer a master's student to be at 1 page. When you get into PhDs, then you generally see something longer than 1 page.
I think a lot of it depends on, if you're a master's student and you've done a significant amount of research, then you're probably going to have to do more of a 2-page resume. PhDs, definitely 2 pages, but for industry, not longer than 2 pages, even as a postdoc. Now, once you get out and you have lots of years of experience, then by all means, you can add additional pages at that point. But if you're looking at a new hire type position in industry as a PhD or postdoc, 2 pages is going to be your max. Masters, as Drew said, it depends on what you've done, whether you have a 1 or 2.
Okay. What's your advice, or what do you recommend the student to include on their resume or CV to make a good impression?
Trend, ladies.
Sure.
Ladies first.
That's fine.
He's Southern.
Yeah. I like to keep it basic to the 1 page and keep a really good flow. And in that flow, I like to see an objective, and I like that objective to be specific to that job. So, like you were saying, you had the training over in Chicago over the summer. So if that's the type of internship you're looking for, that needs to be described in your objective. But also be careful that you change that objective on your resume for each particular position that you're applying for. That's a warning I give out, because I do receive some resumes that have an objective for a completely different job, and you want to make sure that you never do that. Your education is probably going to be your strongest point, so I would put that next, right after the objective, and list any educational highlights that you have in that area. And then lastly, any work experience that you have. So that's the layout and format that I like to see.
And one thing with the resumes, a lot of resumes, people will put a task down. Like if you're in a club and you complete a task in that club, what we prefer to see is more what did that club accomplish and what did you accomplish as part of that club. So don't put down, I set up for this event, or I help organize this event. More so put down, what did your club accomplish and how were you a part of that role within that. So more bigger picture, more leadership type of traits.
The results.
Yes, the results, the outcomes, yes, very good.
Does everybody recall the situation, task, action, and results kind of formula for your resume? Where you kind of describe what the objective was and what your part was, the actions that you took, and the result that came out of it. We recommend that that's the format you follow.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that I've heard, both from a resume format and the STAR formula. A couple of things I would just add. A lot of people would argue that you don't need an objective, and sometimes that takes up space. Particularly at a setting like a career fair, or even when the resume is having to speak for itself, I really want, if I'm in a career fair, I want my attention to come back to you within seconds. And to know what your objective is right up at the top is really helpful to a recruiter. When you're not there to speak for your resume, again, it's helpful to have it there. So I think an objective is worth the space, but it doesn't need to be very long. It should be very succinct. Because again, I'm trying to bring my eyes back to you within seconds. If I don't see a GPA, I'm going to ask, and my assumption is that if it's not there, it's bad. So I would encourage you to have a GPA on your resume at any level of education. Again, I don't know in the audience how many freshmen we have. You don't have a GPA yet, and so maybe an indicator would be your high school scorecard. The other thing that no one's mentioned is your leadership experiences, and I think that's really important. You know, I would go reverse chronological order on your work experiences, but my eyes are going to go objective, most recent internship or work experience. I'm going to go right down to the bottom, and I want to see activities, extracurricular development that really helps someone's soft skill package as well as their academic package.
I would just add that it really depends on what type of position you're applying for. You know, so if you are applying for something that's going to be a hardcore in a lab somewhere, then that company is going to want to see what hardcore lab skills you have. Whereas if you're applying for something that's a more sales-oriented position, then the things that are probably important there are going to be a little bit different. So I think it's really important that you have a resume that does sort of match up with the types of positions that you're applying for. And at the graduate level, obviously your research is going to be one of your most important things. So that's definitely something that you want to highlight there. Publications, industries care about that. I think a lot of students think if you're a PhD student, only academia cares about your publications list, but that's not true. Industry wants to see that you've been productive, and one way to be able to tell that is by showing what publications you have, where they've gone, that kind of thing. So I think it really goes back to you and what you have that makes you unique. Those are the things you should be highlighting. And then also what type of position you're applying for, and those two things need to be able to match up.
Well, as a matter of fact, the things that help you compete for a job are going to be the same types of things that help you compete in a job. Mm-hmm. And publications and patents and those types of credentials, even after you finish your academic career and move into a professional career, are going to be important. So I would agree from a scientific perspective.
Do you all see summaries or profiles, or have a feeling about them at all instead of an objective?
I prefer the objective. I prefer something short to the point, just gives me a brief overview over the summary myself.
What you call it.
Sure.
I mean, I don't have a strong opinion, but something, I like something succinct that lets me know what that person's interested in, okay, because I'm going to weigh the results right against that summary or that profile or that objective.
It's something I, as an HR practitioner, a lot of times liked to see was a profile about an individual's skill set, knowledge, skills, and abilities, because, again, I didn't want them to ever put the wrong objective for whichever job. But I think it helps brand individual. Like a car, it gets branded. You know that a Highlander will do something different than a minivan versus a Corvette or something like that. So I encourage you to think about it that way as well.
And again, I would say it depends on the position you're applying for. You know, I also work with engineering students, and sometimes in engineering fields, they look at what your major is, and that's the type of position they're going to figure you're going into. So a lot of those companies say, unless you're applying for something different than what I would expect from your major, I don't even need to see an objective. So it really is going to depend on what you're applying for.
Okay, how about references? Where do they belong? Or should they be included?
I like to see them in the interview stage, and I like to see them brought to an interview and just have available for the person. That's my preference, is that's where they're at and not on the resume themselves. So that's the other thing as people interview. Make sure you have plenty of copies within your file, because in our office alone you could end up talking to 4 to 5 different people for sure.
Did everybody hear that? If you're going on an interview, bring multiple copies of your resume, because you could be giving it to many different people. Okay. Good tip.
Yeah, and just another comment. I think, if you're at the stage of your career search where you're actively looking for a job and sending your references out to companies across the country, or just out of respect to your references, it might be better to withhold those until you get into the interview stage, as opposed to sharing that information too broadly.
I think it's
not specified how many references you need. What's a good number to have?
3 is what I usually go with. Are you?
I
You
say
guys
3 to
three?
5. No more than 5 because that just gets
3 to
overwhelming.
5.
Yeah.
If I've only lifeguarded and waited tables, should I include them on a resume for a professional job?
I'll go first this time.
Yeah.
So, again, we hope that internships and other accomplishments outweigh some of those types of jobs. But I have a lot of respect for any job if you're working your way through school. So if it's a way that you've been able to balance schoolwork and a job throughout your academic career, it absolutely deserves to be on the resume.
And within that job, lifeguarding, focus on the things that matter to employers: safety, the security of the other, or teamwork with the other staff, those type of behaviors. Focus on those type of things versus sunning yourself.
I know earlier you guys mentioned like if you live on a farm and so like part of your family duties is like doing farm work, how would you present that on a resume? Because it's kind of weird, it's just something that you do.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I made that comment, so again, I'll jump in first here. So much for chivalry. But, I've seen it. I've seen different descriptions in a lot of different ways. Farm hand is like a title that I've seen. It kind of undersells a little bit about what you're doing, but something to indicate that you've had those types of experiences and understand that what that type of work involves. What I really like to see, best case scenario, is something that might indicate where you made management decisions over time. And so I've seen, for example, where there's, within a family's operation that you're in charge of certain aspects of that operation. That's probably best case scenario as far as how it's represented on a resume. So that's kind of opposite ends of the spectrum there.
Can you think of anything else?
And I've also previewed resumes where it's included in the objective, where they'll say raised on a family farm, helped for 12 years, and list a length of time and maybe some duties in the objective. So I think whether it's in the objective or the work experience area, either one is okay for me.
Yeah, sometimes even if you have unpaid positions, technically, put them in your experience section. The number of hours you're putting in and the effort that you're doing and the skills you're learning, even if it's not specifically a paid position, it's still fine to include in that category.
Should I include a picture?
For the types of position we're doing in our company, I would say no.
Yeah, we're actually a little uncomfortable with photographs. It just lends itself to bias,
Yep,
and
it does.
we really don't want to have bias in our hiring decision-making process. So I would say we'll never ask for a picture, and nor do we really want a picture.
Sounds good. Okay.
Should you put like maybe your LinkedIn profile or website if you happen to have more questions?
Yeah, and that changes things a little bit. Yeah.
If it's good, if you have the question, if you didn't hear, was do you include a LinkedIn website? I would say if it's, as long as it's professional, as long as you haven't thrown your LinkedIn profile together to the point where there's typos and it's not describing you well and your picture is maybe less than professional. So if none of those things are the case, if you have a nice professional site and it looks great, absolutely, I would say include it.
And I'm glad that pictures came up, because at the career fair this year, we will have a photo booth for the attendees to get their picture taken, and in your professional outfit, and you will be able to download your picture with multiple different backgrounds and use it on your LinkedIn profile, so you will have a professional looking picture, and that's a gift from the Career Services to you. So hopefully you will be able to do that and get rid of the one with your party hat on.
That's a good idea.
And that's
Don't steal
yeah.
it. Don't give it to Iowa State.
On this, it's a good idea, and on this subject. So, your social media brand is probably just as important or more important than your references. That came up earlier. So we're probably quicker to check you out on LinkedIn or Facebook than we are to check references after the interview.
Thank you for saying that. I did not pay him. I did not pay him at all. No. Okay.
Those are questions.
Yes. Yes.
When would there be like reason to actually send a picture for any job?
There was a time when people thought they needed to do that. I think that's maybe a passé question. I don't know.
There are
You
still a
didn't
lot of
live
students who don't know and who include that on their resumes.
Real estate.
Yeah, I've been looking at a few lately.
Okay.
But it used to be something that was very common. There were some industries where they want that. Now it tends to be more if you're going to be a movie star or an actor or an actress, where that is actually a requirement. But for other things, no.
How about like fonts or colored paper, perfumed resumes? What's your thoughts?
I say keep the fonts simple. 10 to 12 point range is really nice for depending on the space and the room that you need on the page. And I just prefer white or an off-white colored paper and just black ink. No color is necessary or needed on the printed.
Same here.
I love pink paper that smells like roses, so if you can bring that to the career fair, it would make my day. But I've never seen perfumed paper, I don't think, so that's a new one to me.
I'm older than you, I've been around.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. I think something that's simple to read. Keep in mind that your resumes might be photocopied, scanned, so a lot of the use of color that you have will get lost through our system. And so if you're counting on those attributes to differentiate I think differentiating yourself is a good idea, but you might lose that differentiation if that's how you're choosing to do so. So I would not do it in a way that there are other ways to incorporate points of differentiation as well.
And I would just jump in with the font size, just because I've seen some really small font sizes lately.
Go to 2 pages.
Especially if you're at a career fair, it's hard to read. I tease my husband. When he turned 40, he suddenly got to wear bifocals, and now he can't read an 8-point font very well. So if he was a recruiter and you were going to take your resume to him, he probably wouldn't even be able to look at it because it's hard for him to read. So try and keep those types of things in mind too. In addition to the photocopying, the easier it is, cleaner, neater looking, it's going to be easier for the recruiter to read.
Should I include pronouns in my resumes? Like, should I say, I developed X or I did Y?
I would say maybe more in the cover letter. Just where I would say that I would want to see those type of things. And just more bullets in your resume.
Or action verb first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does everybody get that? Oh yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to ask about margins on the paper. Like how small can you take a margin for it comes too busy?
Well, first of all, I like bullet points as well, and I use the margins to take some notes. So just be a little cautious for old timers like me, I guess. But I don't think there's any hard, fast rule as far as that goes.
If it's super busy when you look at it, because you've skinnied your margins up to here, you need to get rid of some information or move to a second page.
Yeah, and I think where we're going with these bullet points and these margins and this layout is, again, particularly at a career fair, I'm trying to bring my attention back to the individual within seconds.
Yeah.
And if I'm having to read pronouns that are in statements and lots of information, it's distracting to what you hope is a good dialogue. There'll be other opportunities to provide information later.
Yes.
Well, a successful experience or like competition, I would add to Mexico.
Like a competition, like a case
like
competition?
and didn't want the prize or you were like in internship but then failed.
Okay.
Yes, this happened.
Okay. Did you get her question? So
think
she's
so.
involved in the case competition, but they didn't win. Is it good to put it that she participated or not? Like,
I think so.
I think so. I think
Yeah.
it's good to include it.
think it
put-
shows an extracurricular, right?
It's
That's-
Yeah,
an example
and
of
put her
teamwork,
role,
extracurricular.
your role on the team, what your role was, yeah.
Yeah, and so your accomplishment wasn't that you won first prize, but you worked effectively together to develop the product or the project. Okay? Does that help? Yeah. Does it, oh, sorry. Yes.
This is kind of a different question. I was wondering, how many of the resumes that actually come to you guys are gone through by people or are gone through by just a computer?
Good question.
Very good question.
At our particular company, a person is actually looking at each individual resume still.
Yeah, it depends on how the resume is received. So the advantage you have coming up here in a couple of weeks for the various career fairs at colleges here on campus, I mean, every single resume is going to be seen by a person. You know, if you apply to most companies online, I shouldn't say most, many companies that receive resumes online, there's some screening questions that you'd have to pass those screens before it would get to a person. So let's say we had a minimum GPA, had citizenship requirements and certain years of experience. If you didn't meet those requirements for that job, no one would ever see that resume.
Does it help you if a resume includes context in terms of like the size of an organization they work for, or maybe how many dollars they raised or saved, anything that's quantified? Is that helpful for you?
That doesn't really matter to me. What matters more is what they achieved versus the dollar quantity, because a dollar quantity to some may seem like a lot. In an organization within college, it may be a lot,
Right.
but in the business world, it might be a small amount, you know,
Okay.
that they would deal with every day. And so
Sure.
I think more so what they did to achieve that, and
Okay.
just being in charge of it, if they were the treasurer or that type of thing. It's more so what I would look for. I don't know what you guys.
Well, we finally found a point to differ on. I've agreed with everything you said, but I do like metrics, and maybe that's my analytical side or a little bit of our culture, but I agree with the point that, you know, be careful how you position that, but maybe it's accomplished X% of a goal as opposed to what the raw number might be. But
Yeah.
to be able to document that this was the goal and this is what I achieved numerically is a plus and something that not a lot of students are able to do.
Right, absolutely. And if you were like the employee of the month of a 500-person organization versus a 10-person organization, you know, where it just gets passed around monthly,
Right.
or like, you know, each year,
Yeah.
there's a distinction, right? There's a difference. So if there's any way that you can try to tell the story about what the context is, I think that can be helpful to recruiters at some point.
And so let's fast forward 5 years. If you're looking for a second job or a third job at that time and you don't have metrics,
Good point.
now
Yeah.
you're really at a
Yeah.
disadvantage. So, I mean, it becomes more important as time goes on.
Good
I
point.
think if you can add metrics, it sounds more credible to you.
Yeah, right.
You know, I mean, if you actually can say, I saved a company X number of dollars or decreased,
Cycle time.
yeah, I mean, it's hard to refute that.
Right.
So it makes you sound more credible.
Absolutely. We have time for about another question or two. Does anybody have one before we start reviewing the resumes?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
I want to ask, the way you look at the major GPA, is it the higher the better, or once people meet the minimum, you look at other things of the resume?
It's a really good question.
I think the higher the better, and we kind of look at it as we use the 3.5 or above rule. And I say whenever you're doing your resume, sometimes I disagree with Drew a little bit. He said include it no matter what, but lots of times I'll say if it's below 3.5, I would not include it on the resume because that's kind of our point that we use at our particular company that we're looking for.
And then we'll ask, if you bring it and you don't have it, we'll say, what happened here? And I've noticed at different universities, sometimes it seems like we have some students that struggle, they get into one program, they stay within that program a long time, that tanks their GPA to some point, and then they make the decision to move to another program, and they you know, they have a lot of catch up to do. And when they explain that, or they explain, I had one applicant said, you know, he had a severe accident in his senior year that caused him some problems with his GPA. All of those type of things to me are credible things that help support why your GPA is where it's at.
Is that 3.5 out of a 4?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to remember, to put what your GPA
scale is.
out
Yes.
of, yes, because U of I
Yes.
used to be out of a 5, and so, you know,
Yeah.
you didn't want to, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And so for people in the back who couldn't hear the question, it involved major GPA and there was a second part, but
After a certain point, do you?
that's what it was. And I wanted to come back to after a certain point, how important is it? And so, first of all, if you struggle in those first couple of years and your new major GPA is significantly different than your overall GPA, that shows a trajectory, and we understand that. I mean, and so if we kicked everybody out who was ambitious their freshman year,
Yeah.
my goodness, we wouldn't have any.
Right.
There wouldn't be a whole lot of time left.
Exactly.
So major GPA can play a major role in explaining the overall GPA.
Yep.
But I'm a firm believer that after a certain GPA, and for me it's a 3.0, so maybe I'm a little lower standards. I hate to think that, but
It's okay, Drew, you can hire me.
yeah, right. I worked hard to get my 3.0, but I would say that, and actually there are studies that would show that there are other indicators of success rather than GPA. So if you're a 4.0 with no other activities or internships, I'm going to be less attracted to you than a 3.0 with lots of leadership and lots of experience.
And work experience.
So there is a threshold where high is high enough, and it's somewhere in the 3.0 to 3.5 range.
So I would just like to, again, thank the panel. And